My Horses. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Loveday. My Horses by Theophile Gautier, translated by Professor F.C. de Sumichrast from My Private Menagerie, from The Works of Theophile Gautier, Volume 19. LibriVox Coffee Break Collection, Number 8. Now let not the reader, on seeing this title, hastily accuse me of being a swell. Horses! That is a pretentious word to be written down by a man of letters. Musa pedestris, says Horace, that is, the muse goes on foot, and Parnassus itself has but one horse in its stable, Pegasus. Besides, he is a winged steed, and by no means quiet in harness, if we may credit what Schiller tells us in his ballad. I am not a sportsman, alas, and deeply do I regret it, for I am as fond of horses as if I had 500,000 a year, and I am entirely of the opinion of the Arabs concerning pedestrians. The horse is man's natural pedestal, and the one complete being is the centaur, whom mythology so ingeniously invented. Nevertheless, although I am merely a man of letters, I have owned horses. In the year 1843 or 1844, I found in the pay dirt of journalism, washed out in the wooden pan of the phaeton, a sufficient quantity of gold dust to justify the hope that I might feed, besides my cats, dogs, and magpies, a couple of animals of larger size. I first had a couple of Shetland ponies, the size of big dogs, hairy as bears, all mane and tail, and who looked at me in such friendly fashion through their long black hair that I felt more like showing them into the drawing-room than sending them to the stable. They would take sugar out of my pockets like trained horses. But they proved to be decidedly too small. They would have answered as saddle horses for English children 8 years of age, or as coach horses for Tom Thumb, but I was already in the enjoyment of that athletic and portly frame for which I am famed, and which has enabled me to bear up, without bending too much under the burden, under 40 consecutive years of supplying of copy. The difference between the owner and the animals was unquestionably too striking, even though the little black ponies drew at a very lively gait the light phaeton to which they were harnessed with the daintiest tan harness, that looked as if it had been bought in a toy shop. Comic illustrated papers were not as numerous then as now, but there were quite enough of them to publish caricatures of me and of my horses. It goes without saying that, profiting by the latitude allowed to caricature, I was represented as of elephantine bulk and appearance, like the god Ganesa, the Hindu god of wisdom, and that my ponies were shown as no larger than poodles, rats, or mice. It is also true that I could readily enough have carried my pair one under each arm, and taken the carriage on my back. I did for a moment think of having a pony 4 in hand, but such a Lilliputian equipage would have merely attracted greater attention. So to my great regret, for I had already become fond of them, I replaced my Shetlands with 2 dapple-grey cobs of larger size, with powerful necks, broad chests, stout and well set up, which were not Mecklenburgers, no doubt, but plainly more capable of dragging me along. They were both mares, the one called Jane, the other Betsy. So far as outward looks went, they were as alike as 2 peas, and never was there a better matched pair apparently. But Betsy was as lazy as Jane was willing. While the one drew steadily, the other was satisfied with trotting along, saving herself, and taking good care to do nothing. These 2 animals, of the same breed, of the same age, and destined to live in the same stable, had the liveliest antipathy for each other. They could not bear one another, fought in the stable, and bit each other as they reared in harness. It was impossible to reconcile them, which was a pity, for with their hog manes, like those of the horses on the Parthenon frieze, their quivering nostrils, and their eyes dilated with anger, they looked uncommonly handsome, as they were driven up or down the Avenue de Champs-Élysées. A substitute had to be found for Betsy, and a small mare, somewhat lighter coloured, for it had been impossible to match her exactly, was brought round. Jane immediately welcomed the newcomer, and did the honours of the stable to her most graciously, and ere long they became fast friends. Jane would rest her head on Blanche's neck, she had been so called because her grey coat was rather whitish, and when they were let loose in the yard after being rubbed down, they would play together like a pair of dogs or children. If one was taken out driving, the one left in the stable was plainly wearying for her, and as soon as she heard in the distance the ring of her companion's hoofs on the paving stones, she set up a joyous neigh, like a trumpet blast, to which the other did not fail to reply as she approached. They would come up to be harnessed with astonishing docility, and took of themselves their proper place by the pole. Like all animals that are loved and well treated, Jane and Blanche soon became most familiar and trusting. They would follow me without bridle or halter like the best trained dog, and when I stopped they would stick their noses on my shoulder in order to be caressed. Jane was fond of bread, and Blanche of sugar, and both were crazy about melon skin. I could make them do anything in return for these dainties. If man were not odiously brutal and ferocious, as he too frequently shows himself towards animals, they would cling to him most gladly. Their dim brain is filled with the thought of that being who thinks, speaks, and does things the meaning of which escapes them. He is a mystery and a wonder to them. They will often look at you with eyes full of questions you cannot answer, for the key to their speech has not yet been found. Yet they have a speech which enables them to exchange, by means of intonations not yet noted by man, ideas that are rudimentary, no doubt, but which are such as may be conceived by creatures within their sphere of action and feeling. Less stupid than we are, animals succeed in understanding a few words of our idiom, but not enough to enable them to converse with us. Besides, as the words they do learn refer solely to what we exact of them, the conversation would be brief. But that animals speak cannot be doubted by any one who has lived in any degree of intimacy with dogs, cats, horses, or other creatures of that sort. For instance, Jane was naturally intrepid. She never refused, and nothing frightened her. But after a few months of cohabitation with Blanche, her character changed, and she manifested at times sudden and inexplicable fear. Her companion, much less brave, must have told her ghost stories at night. Often, when going through the Bois de Boulogne at dusk or after dark, Blanche would stop short or shy, as if a phantom, invisible to me, had risen up before her. She trembled in every limb, breathed hard, and broke out into sweat. If I attempted to urge her ahead with the whip, she backed, and all Jane could do, strong as she was insufficient to induce her to go on. One of us would have to get down, cover her eyes with the hand, and lead her until the vision had vanished. Little by little, Jane became subject to the same terror, the reason of which, no doubt, Blanche told her once they were back in their stable. I may as well confess that, for my part, when I would be driving down a dark road on which the moonlight produced alternations of light and shadow, and Blanche suddenly became rooted to the spot as though a spectre had sprung at her head, and refused to move, she who was usually so docile that Queen Mab's whip, made of a cricket's bone with a spider's thread for a thong, was enough to start her into a gallop, I could not repress a slight shudder, or refrain from peering into the darkness rather anxiously, while at times the harmless trunks of ash or birch trees would appear to me as spectral-looking as one of Goya's caprices. I took great delight in driving these dear animals myself, and we soon became very intimate. It was merely as a matter of form that I held the reins, for the least click of the tongue was enough to direct them, to turn them to the right or the left, to make them go faster, or to stop them. They quickly learned all my habits, and started of themselves for the office, the printers, the publishers, the Bois de Boulogne, and the houses where I went to dinner on certain days of the week, and this so accurately that they would have ended by compromising me, for they would have revealed the places to which I paid the most mysterious visits. If I happened to forget the time in the course of an interesting or tender conversation, They would remind me it was getting late by neighing or pawing in front of the balcony. Although I greatly enjoyed traversing the city in the phaeton drawn by my two friends, I could not help at times thinking the north wind sharp and the rain cold, when the months came along which the Republican calendar named so appropriately the months of mist, of frost, of rain, of wind, of snow, brumer, frimer, pluvios, ventos, nivus. So I purchased a small blue coupe, lined with white reps, which was likened to the equipage of the famous dwarf of the day, a piece of impertinence I did not mind. A brown coupe, lined with garnet, followed the blue one, and was itself replaced by a dark green coupe lined with dark blue, for I actually did sport a coach, I, poor newspaper writer holding no government stock, for 5 or 6 years. And my ponies were none the less fat and in good condition, though they were fed on literature, had substantives for oats, adjectives for hay, and adverbs for straw. But alas, there came, no one knows very well why, the revolution in February. A great many paving stones were picked up for patriotic purposes, and Paris became rather unfit for carriage travel. I could, of course, have escaladed the barricades with my agile steeds and my light equipage, but it was only at the cook shop that I could get credit, and I could not possibly feed my horses on roast chicken. The horizon was dark with heavy clouds, through which flashed red gleams. Money had taken fright and gone into hiding. The press, on the staff of which I was, had suspended publication, and I was glad enough to find a person willing to buy my horses, harness, and carriages for a fourth of their value. It was a bitter grief to me, and I would not venture to say that no tears ran down my cheeks onto the manes of Jane and Blanche when they were led away. Sometimes their new owner would drive past the house. I always knew their quick, sharp trot at a distance, and always the sudden way they would stop under my windows proved that they had not forgotten the place where they had been so tenderly loved and so well cared for, and a sigh would break responsive for me as I said to myself, "Poor Jane, poor Blanche, I wonder if they are happy." And the loss of them is the one and only thing I felt sore over when I lost my slender fortune. End of My Horses by Theophile Gautier, translated by Professor F. C. de Sumichrast. Recording by Loveday.